I'm Kara Brook. I work with the Foundation for Appalachian Ohio with the great team you've met here. And if you want help from any of us today, just look for our logo and we can guide you. But we did want to start just with a thank you for the work that you do as educators. When we dreamed of this fellowship idea, we thought about a lot of different professions. And I'm so glad that the pilot is taking place with those who work with our K through 12 students. Our region has tremendous momentum. So many good things are happening right now, and it's really a transformative time. But we still know the playing field is not level for a lot of kids. And those of you that are closest to it have faces and personalities and names for a lot of those children. So we really believe in that insight you bring from your professional work as we think about our region. So my role today is to introduce our first guest speaker, which I'm excited to do, and also just share a little bit about the fellowship. Why did we create a fellowship? Why are you here? There's probably two themes for today. One is to introduce you to your new role, and the other is to talk about how we lead from our strengths. So you will hear us talk about the Foundation for Appalachian Ohio as FAO. In the beginning, our founders used FAO not only as our name, but our tagline. F for fostering, A for access, O for opportunity. They founded us nearly 25 years ago because they saw a lot of potential of the people here in our region, leaders with great ideas and tremendous capacity, but too often they were held back by the lack of philanthropic support. And so you'll hear more about that today in your breakout sessions as we talk about different community groups you might want to become involved in. But fast forward 25 years, and we all see that same pioneering spirit in all of you, and we're so excited to see what comes of your leadership and your service in our communities. Why establish a foundation, a fellowship? For us, one of the questions we hear the most is who is coming next. So FAO is home to 600 charitable funds, most with living active advisory committees, 15 affiliate foundations. We have 200 volunteers. And the most consistent question we hear is, who's coming after us? Who's coming after us when we retire, when we can't do this anymore? Who are the next civic leaders for our communities? And I'm so glad that now we have an answer. It's all of you. And so that's a big part of our motivation for creating this program. A couple of things we wanted to say. This is not a program to make you a leader. You were selected because you are leaders. And these gatherings are not curriculum or courses. You'll probably be glad to hear there's no test. This is just about bringing you perspective from leaders out in a variety of fields. What are the lessons they've learned the hard way? What are the frameworks they use? What's happening in their industry? And so what you take away from this fellowship really will be what you gather and what you need. And so we encourage you to listen and to ask questions, and this is to support each other. We'll just say from the front, this is a pilot. We're designing it as we go. You probably can tell that by now from working with us. We hope to have your feedback, and we hope that you'll be part of that design process because we believe in this idea of the fellowship and need your help to help us prove it works. Our staff team encouraged me to share a personal story, and so I decided I would do that. I serve today as the president and CEO of the foundation. When I had my interview for this job, it was my 25th birthday, and this was my dream job by far. I had started in the foundation as an intern and done some other things. And when I got home from that interview, I found my family in my yard planting a garden because they knew when I was so disappointed I wouldn't get my dream job. I'd need something to tend, to help with the grief process. And I actually got the job, and the garden withered and never went anywhere. But, I was coming into managing at a very young age a financial institution, and not only a financial institution, but one with a big regional change agenda to tackle problems that have been with us for generations. And I was certainly very excited for the role. And I got a call from a woman that I didn't really know that well. And she said, I think you have tremendous potential. And I think you're going to be a key leader from Appalachian, Ohio. She wasn't even from Appalachian, Ohio. And she said, I've been talking with my friends and I've been researching leadership programs, and I have found one that I think is the best for you. and I am personally going to pay for you to go to this program. And I was floored. I mean, this program cost what would be the equivalent of a car. And I was floored that she would invest financially in me. And she said, this is an investment in you as a leader. And that's really what this fellowship is for all of you. You know, I was always motivated. This is home to me. I've ridden school buses and I've had more opportunities than others. And it was always a calling. But the weight of that investment she made certainly was heavy on me to try to pay that back and to pay that forward. And so really a big part of our job with the fellowship is done by investing in you. And I'm super excited to call her tomorrow and say, hey, we were with 120 other fellows that are on now a similar path. And just think about it. If all of you also then help support another 120, that'll be over 14,000 people working to make a difference in this region. And so that's the kind of scale that can really have impact. So we believe so deeply in you and what you're doing. There are some other things that we'll share during the session, but I'm just thrilled to welcome our keynote speaker. And that's Kimberly Murnieks, who's the director of Ohio's Office of Budget and Management. She is a child of Appalachia. She grew up in Washington County. I saw several from Washington County this morning. She earned her bachelor's degree in political science from Marietta College, a master's in public administration from Ohio State, and that was the Glenn School, a college named after another child of Appalachia, we might mention. Director Murnieks has held senior roles at the Ohio Department of Education, at the Attorney General's office. She's president-elect of the National Association of State Budget Offices. In her current role, she's essentially the CFO for the state of Ohio. And if we think about it, that's essentially a $100 billion enterprise. It's larger than most countries. So it's a big post. During her tenure, we've weathered a lot of storms, COVID, inflation, supply. We don't have to tell you guys what's happened. But, if you look at it, Ohio earned a credit upgrading of a AAA ranking. We have strong reserves, and we're growing significantly as a state. And that can only happen with sound financial house and financial leadership. And so it's wonderful. All of us here care about children, and I think we should just say that no Ohio governor has ever prioritized children like Governor Mike DeWine. When you look at the budget, the biennium budget proposal that Director Murnieks put together, there was a lot for education for children. And I think it's fair to say that no governor has prioritized Appalachian Ohio like Governor Mike DeWine. Many of you, like me, are probably following the unprecedented $500 million investment in our communities. I live in Hocking County. I know there's 7 or 8 here. In our community alone, there's going to be a new theater, a new children's museum, a new co-working center, and these are happening across the region. It's truly historic. My point is, all of these things it helps to have a budget director who understands the potential of our region and believes in what we're doing. We had the chance to meet with Governor DeWine when he was looking for ideas that were transformative for Appalachian Ohio. And we presented the idea of this fellowship. And he suggested that we work with Director Murnieks. And she found the funds that are a good portion. And we'll talk more about where the funding comes from, because there were private donors as well, but helped us through this grant process. And so it just felt so perfectly right that Director Murnieks be our first inaugural keynote speaker. And so, Director Murnieks, thank you, and we welcome you here today.
All right. Well, thank you, Kara. And I'm just so very excited to be here this morning and to see this program coming to life. As Kara said, I'm originally from Washington County, grew up here in Southeast Ohio, and if I'm allowed to, as the state budget director, say that I have a favorite part of Ohio. Maybe don't tell the rest of Ohio, but this is my favorite. This is where my heart is. So it's wonderful to be here with you today. Very excited. So we also have just such a lovely place here. Just like looking at our surroundings and the history, and just so I encourage you all to just take some time today to just soak it in and make this memory as just what it is, a great, fantastic kickoff. So I am Kim Murnieks. I'm the director of the Office of Budget and Management, probably something that people haven't really heard of. We're kind of under the radar, but I'm the chief financial officer for the state. Ohio is, Kara mentioned, bigger than a lot of countries. Our GDP, if you look at Ohio and then you compare us to the rest of the world, we would be 21st. So pretty big impact we have here in the state of Ohio. And of course, the state of Ohio and the entire, westward movement of America has its roots right here in Southeast Ohio. So I'll just talk a little bit this morning. I made some notes. I'll kind of go through it, but I would love to save some of my time to have a dialogue, answer questions. So fair warning, as you're listening, think about what you would like to talk about, because I would love to have a conversation here with you all this morning and take some time to learn from you. So a little bit about me first, and then I'll talk about some things that I've kind of learned along the way, and some of which align very nicely with your agenda, by the way. So wasn't really planned at all, but really good synergy there. And then I'll talk a little bit about what I've learned from the governor, and kind of talk about what the Office of Budget and Management does, and why we are, as a state, really investing in Southeast Ohio right now. So I'm looking forward to meeting you all today. On the break, come up, introduce yourself. I'd love to have some individual conversations too. So a little bit about me first. Both of my parents were born and grew up in the Marietta area. So I was born in Marietta Memorial Hospital. My mom was actually a nurse there, and lived in Washington County my whole childhood. A graduate of Warren High School, and as Kara said, went to Marietta College. First of all, how many of you are from Washington County? Raise of hands. Yay. Anyone from Warren High School area? All right. Well, maybe next time I'll have to. All right. Well, if you're from Marietta High School, you're the big rival, but that's okay. I won't hold being a tiger against any of you if you are. So went to Warren High School, and I realized the other day I graduated in 1989, and I still think I'm pretty young, but then I realized when I was looking at the notes Kara sent me that probably most of you weren't even alive when I graduated from high school. So that's a weird, unsettling thought to have, but it also gives me energy that there's just so many of you who have come along after I was kind of here, and it's just, again, so very exciting to be here this morning. So looking back, I was really lucky to have some great role models growing up. And I am sure that each of you can kind of reflect on your own lives and have had similar experiences, and you're educators. So you are now those role models. When I was young, my parents were great role models for me. My mom was a working mom. She was a nurse. She was an LPN. She went to LPN school right after she graduated from high school. And then when I was in high school, she actually went back to Hawking College and got her RN. So it was just wonderful for me as a young girl growing up in the Appalachian region to see my mom kind of continuously working and improving her education and taking those promotions at work. And I think that was inspiring to me, first of all. And as I am older and kind of can reflect on that, I can see that she was influenced by her mom, my grandmother, who during World War II was one of those, working women. And she went to work at Forma Scientific, which was, I think it's been renamed a bunch of times. It's still in Marietta, but so she worked there her whole life after that. She raised her 4 kids on her own, and really, I think was an inspiration. And when I think about my grandmother, she was not your typical making cookies kind of grandma. She was more like the going to work in a factory and coming home and smoking her cigarettes and drinking a beer kind of grandma. But she also was very just kind of fiercely independent. And I wear her ring every day almost, and it is her engagement ring from not my grandfather, who she divorced, by the way, because she wasn't having some of his shenanigans. But she had this long time fiance / boyfriend who was just, they had a kind of a wonderful second relationship, but a really non-traditional relationship for that time. And she just never was inspired to get remarried because she was independent for her time. And I think she passed some of that independence down on to my mom and then to me. And so I really thank her for that, and look at her life in kind of a different way now as an adult than I probably did when I was little, and thinking, where are the cookies? So I digress. But so after graduating from Warren High School, went to Marietta College, and really when I was at Marietta, I started reflecting even then back on my childhood and some of the others who had really influenced me. One was my Brownie Girl Scout leader. When I was, I was kind of an introverted kid when I was really young, but my mom kind of pushed me to be a Girl Scout, to join Brownies. And I had just an amazing troop leader who, she wasn't any of our moms, but she was our volunteer, and I think we had like 12 or 15, little 6-7-year-old girls, and she would take us camping and on hikes and just doing lots of things that were outside of my comfort zone, because at that time, and still, even as an adult, I was more than happy to just kind of be in my room or outside in the backyard and reading a book under a tree, something like that. So she was really, inspirational to me and pushed me to do new things. So I don't know how many of you were in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or 4-H growing up, but I bet a lot of you were, because, those are kind of great leadership experiences. I also learned things as a Brownie Girl Scout, like don't spray bug spray inside of your tent, because that I learned later that night when it started pouring down the rain can cause the the rain or waterproofing to not work so well, the chemical reaction there, and all your friends might wake up with wet sleeping bags, and then they will all know whose fault it was, the girl who didn't like spiders. So I also had a fantastic high school English teacher. Her name was Gretchen Feldmeyer. And at the time, I did not appreciate her tough grading. I was kind of that like introverted, really, bookish kid. I always got straight A's all the way through elementary school into high school. And then I remember getting my first paperback in 11th grade honors English, and it had a B. And I was just devastated. I could not, what is going on? I'm a great writer, right? So what I now can see is she was a fantastic teacher who wanted to inspire us all to do more. And I think she could see the roots of a good communicator in me, but wanted to build that. And so from her, I really learned how to make a persuasive argument, how to write a well-formed essay. And those are things that when I was in college, I realized not everyone had that basis, and it really served me well and has throughout the rest of my career. So when I get to talking about some lessons I've learned, that's going to be a key theme that I'll come back with. But because of her, I have really built that foundation. And I know that you as educators, one of the things that you are doing for all of our kids is building that strong foundation, and I appreciate that so much. So also when I was at Marietta College, I did another thing that kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone. I did a semester in Washington, D.C., and I interned at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And at the time, I thought I wanted to be a prosecuting attorney. I figured out really quickly that the work of a prosecutor is pretty much 0% like it looks like on Law and Order. Did not love it. But what I learned is that sometimes having experiences that you don't enjoy and that it really helps you learn what you don't want to do. It was my junior year in college, and I had, my whole path was I was going to go to law school, and came back and I was like, no, I don't want to go to law school. I don't want to be a lawyer. So I apologize if any of you are lawyers. But anyway, I talked to my advisor at the time, another great mentor to me, and she said, well, what did you see that you really, touched your heart, that you really want to build on, and what kind of a career do you want to make? And I said, well, I really think that what the world needs is a better education system, and so maybe I should be a teacher. And then we kind of looked at all the fact that I hadn't taken any education courses by that point in time. And she's like, well, you might also want to consider public policy, graduate school. So maybe doing education policy could be a path to explore. So that was really an interesting kind of timing for me, because it was exactly the same time, the same year that the DeRolf school funding case was filed. And kind of on her encouragement, I kind of dug in to that case right at the early beginnings of it. And so part of what I had to do at Marietta College as part of the honors program was to write a senior thesis. So I decided that I was going to write mine on education policy in Ohio. And that kind of ended up being kind of a path for the next many years of my life. So when I was doing the research, again, it was kind of in the very early days of the case. So I just called up the law office that had filed the case. And shockingly, the attorney who was kind of lead on the case spent like an hour talking with me, and then referred me to a professor at Ohio State who was one of their experts, and just kind of networked from there. And so I did end up writing my paper on school funding in Ohio. I applied to graduate school. I applied a bunch of different places, like you do. Ended up being offered a fellowship at Ohio State University. And at that point in my life, I kind of was, out of money, and my parents were pretty much out of money, and looking at my two sisters who were younger than me. And so the fellowship opportunity at Ohio State was the key for me at that time. And then when I arrived, I realized that the professor that I had been talking to about that school funding case was actually on the faculty in the program that I was going to be studying in. So he ended up being my advisor. So again, kind of just like following the breadcrumbs of this little growing network that I had. So while I was at Ohio State, I continued doing more research in the school finance area. I graduated with my master's degree after a couple of years, and my first job out of graduate school was at the Office of Budget and Management, and because I had met people at OBM while I was doing that research. So again, just kind of expanding that network and continuing to kind of grow in my career. So I worked at OBM for about 5 years in the education section, doing education policy, met a lot of people, ended up being offered a position at the Ohio Department of Education. And I was there for about 10 years, again, doing all of the kind of variety of school funding and school options programs. I also had 3 kids while I was at ODE. I have a daughter who is now 22, and then I had in 2005 I had twins. And when I was kind of home for and on bed rest with those twins, I got a call from the superintendent of schools at that time. Her name was Susan Zellman. And she said, hey, Kim, I have this project. The budget just passed, and the state legislature created a voucher program, a statewide ed choice voucher program. And I need someone to run it who will run it appropriately and right without messing it up, because all of the eyes are going to be on this. Would you like to do it? And I was like, well, I don't really, all of my research had been in kind of the regular school funding system, and kind of my whole job up till then, series of jobs had been. So I was like, well, let me think about this. And so I think Google, or whatever search engine that was kind of it was probably the early days of Google. I went to my computer, which wasn't even a laptop at that time, and kind of just Googled school vouchers. And what came up was educational vouchers are the most controversial topic in education. I was like, that sounds interesting. So sign me up for that. So that's kind of how I continued to kind of build my career, and ended up ultimately being in charge at ODE of the kind of the regular school funding and all of the school options programs. Then I got kind of burnt out on education, frankly. And I know you all will never get burned out in education, but the school funding and kind of the choice and the vouchers and kind of all of that was getting to be a lot. And so I decided I was ready for a change. And through some folks that I had met during that career, I was introduced to a man who had just been elected Attorney General for the state of Ohio, Mike DeWine. I'd never crossed paths or met him up until then. He had been Lieutenant Governor when I was very early in my career. He had been, in the Senate, but I'd never met him. And so introduced to Mike DeWine, and came on board with him during the transition time between the election and when you take office in January. Is kind of the transition period where folks are putting together their senior teams. He offered me the position of Chief Operations Officer. When I was at ODE, one of the roles I had in that decade was Deputy Chief of Staff, where I learned a lot about IT and HR. I kind of before doing the voucher thing, I had become a trained project manager. So it kind of all fit together. And so a dozen years later, I'm still here with Mike DeWine and a member of his senior team, kind of now going full circle back to the Ohio Office of Budget and Management. I'm a member of the cabinet and put together the budget for the state of Ohio. So that's kind of my almost 30 year career here in public service in the state of Ohio. And it does kind of come in full circle back to being with you all now here in Southeast Ohio. So it's kind of interesting to reflect and think about how things come in full circle in our lives and how we have impacts along the way. So I'll kind of transition now from talking about my career to some of the major things I've learned along the way. And hopefully these will be things that are helpful to you as you are growing as leaders. And the first thing is something that I learned in 11th grade from Gretchen Feldmeyer, and that is build strong communication skills. Written and verbal, whether you're drafting an email, writing a letter, it's important to be clear, concise, to the point. Your written word is often the first impression you make. Sometimes that's in an email. Sometimes nowadays that's in a social media post. So anything you write, anything you are putting out publicly, whether that is a speech or a tweet, make sure that it is well written, because those things will follow you. I probably drive my communications director crazy now, because before he puts out any tweets, I want to read them. And I am probably too aggressive of an editor, because thanks to Ms. Feldmeyer, I'm kind of a grammar nerd too. But as one of my early mentors and bosses, Greg Browning, once told me, never let anyone else speak for you. Make sure that the words you put out are your words. And so I've really taken that to heart and make sure that whatever my office puts out really are my words, are what I would say and how I would say it, so that it can't ultimately be misconstrued. So build strong communication skills. Second, kind of a theme as I kind of talk through my career, cultivate your network. I will admit this was not something that I thought about as I was kind of going along the way. And so in some ways, I think, maybe it was luck that I met people at certain times. Maybe it was, just serendipitous. I was in the right place at the right time. But, I am much more intentional now about cultivating my network than I was early in my career. And I can say that is something that I am much more cognizant of. And when I talk to my kids or talk to a group of students or early career professionals or even leaders like you, that's something that I want to encourage, being intentional about who you are networking with, making sure that you're putting yourself out there. Even introverts can learn this skill and become more extroverted and more on the kind of networking side. But every opportunity that you have to meet people is an opportunity to build that network, and it will serve you later in your career, whether you're kind of going back to someone that you knew in high school. In fact, just the other day, Governor DeWine was visiting a school in Marietta, and one of my friends from high school I knew was a teacher there. So I was able to get some kind of inside information from her to pass on to him. And so those are kind of some of the personal network things that along the way you can build into your profession as well. So almost every opportunity that I have had along the way was because someone introduced me to someone else, and I was able to continue to build that network. This group here today, this Growing Home Fellowship, is a fantastic network. When I was looking at kind of the information that Kara sent me, I thought, wow, what a networking opportunity this is for you all as leaders. Just the fact that you now have this network of 130 people across Southeast Ohio, you are all just, this is a gem. And so really build it, honor it, continue to kind of build friendships and these connections as you grow. Take advantage of networking and mentoring opportunities too. So, and be that mentor. You're all educators, so you are all, whether it's formal or informal, you are all mentors to a lot of little people in your lives. But you are also have opportunities to have mentors as well. So kind of that both sides. Make sure that you're paying attention to that networking. The third thing is know your strengths. And I know today you're going to have a fantastic discussion about strengths, and I love the Strengths Finder tool. So I saw that on the agenda today, and that you're going to be talking about leading from your strengths. So I have found that to be invaluable. Over my career, I've taken a lot of, whether it was the Myers-Briggs or DISC or Strengths Finder. They all tell you a little bit about yourself, but I think the Strengths Finder is fantastic because instead of kind of encouraging you to try to be something you're not, it really is encouraging you to lead with those talents, cultivate the talents that are your strongest that you have already. For me, my number one on the Strengths Finder is achiever, and so I know now, after kind of studying this, that I have a tendency to want to check things off the list, to mark things as done, to be on to the next thing. And I also realize that can be exhausting for other people around me. So I feel like it's important to me, and I try to be intentional about this too, to take some time to realize that sometimes reflecting and celebrating is part of the accomplishment. I talked about brownies earlier, how I was a brownie Girl Scout. Well, I've also been a Girl Scout leader for my girls now. And invariably with both sets of girls, I would realize sometimes like a year later that I forgot to pass out the badges. Like we were always doing something, on to the next thing, completing the requirements. But unless someone would say, hey, Ms. Kim, what happened to that outdoor cooking badge? I never feel like I forgot to pass them out. I forget about the celebration because I'm always on to the next thing. That's my achiever thing. So at work, that means I can sometimes be annoyingly demanding, always a little intense and on to the next thing. So when I feel myself doing that, or when someone just tells me that I'm doing that, then I think, okay, I need to just take a step back and think about my other strengths. So the other kind of on my top 5 are learner, ideation, futuristic, and strategic. And so those are not all, check off the list. A lot of those are reflective kinds of strengths. And so I really, when I feel like I am in this kind of mode of kind of on to the next thing, really checking things off the list constantly, maybe being a little demotivating with people because of that, I try to purposefully take some time out, think about the big picture, look about, what can we think about more strategically for the future, be a little more planful, but also reflect on accomplishments. And honestly, I'm again really bad at doing the reflecting on accomplishments. So what I do is I build people around me on my team. My assistant director is really good at doing the part of the job that is recognizing employees and making sure that we have those ongoing employee ceremonies, and my comms director is really good at planning events, and so I really lean on them and remind myself to do that work too. And I also just will take some time and kind of go back to that introverted side of me and read something from a futurist, read something about what's kind of going on in science and technology that may be affecting the world next, and to kind of, encourage that side of my brain a little bit too. So again, we all have strengths. Some of them are very different. And when you feel yourself, maybe exhausting those around you, if you're like me and you're an achiever and always on the go, take some time and take some step back and let those other strengths come out. And then the fourth thing that I wanted to do, and I probably don't even need to say this to this group, but it's raise your hand. You've all done that. You're all here. You've all raised your hand. You joined this program. You applied and were selected. But so about doing things that are out of your comfort zone. This is the inaugural year of this group. So, I'm sure you didn't know what to expect when you raised your hand and signed up, but I'm really glad you did. And the whole region will be glad that you did. But keep doing that and encourage others to do that too. If you raise your hand and apply for a job that may be out of your comfort zone, or take on a task in an organization, a volunteer organization, a community group that maybe is different than what you think your strengths or your talents are, or that maybe it's competitive and you think, well, I don't know if I want to put myself out there, I won't be selected. Well, the worst that can happen is you can get a no. But what I've always tried to do is make them tell you no, and then move on to the next thing. That can be I'll say that can be harder for those of us that are women. We think that unless we meet all of the criteria for a job or a role, we shouldn't put ourselves out there and apply. But I really encourage you to do so. Learning about things that you've never done before is really the key of advancing. And you might fail. I actually personally hate the word failure because I think the only failure is if you don't learn from an experience. But even if you don't achieve the thing that you set out to do, even if you, aren't seeing that whatever you were working on was a success in the way that you planned for that success to be, as long as you're learning, as long as you're advancing, as long as you are thinking about what the next step will bring and how you can continue to positively affect those around you, as long as you're learning, it's not really a failure. That's just my opinion and philosophy. So of course, like I said, you're here today, so you already are at least somewhat comfortable with putting yourself out there and taking that chance, making a little risk part of our lives. So that is fantastic again, and I applaud you for that. So I'll just recap the 4 things I talked about: raise your hand, know your strengths, cultivate your network, and build strong communication skills. Those, I think, to me, are lessons that I've learned that I kind of continue to lean on as I go forward here. So then one more thing that I want to kind of impart is something that I have learned very directly from Governor DeWine. I've worked with him now closely for a dozen years, and I've seen him in a lot of situations, and he has this way of bringing situations down to just, very clear, concise advice, and that is do good and do as much good as you can. I've seen him in several different crisis situations, and in the early days of the administration, even before the pandemic, everyone kind of saw him very publicly during the crisis that was the pandemic. But before that, there were always, the things of the day, whatever is the daily, we say sometimes the daily fires that we all put out. There was one early in the administration that was kind of bigger than the normal, thing of the day. And he just said this really clearly, and I wrote it down in my notebook because I thought it just encapsulated everything that he is and that I've learned from him. And he just said, I have one objective. I'm going to do as much good as I can and get as much done as I can. And, it's good advice. If you're just doing the good and you just keep focusing on, doing the right thing and moving forward, it's practical. And it's also not, it doesn't assume that we can accomplish everything. Just do as much good, get as much good done as you can. We know that we won't solve every single problem in the world. And we also know that when we solve one thing, there's always 100 other things that we can then turn our attention to. So, but just, get as much good done as you each can. So that's what I see with this Growing Home group. You all have the opportunity here to do good and do as much good as you each individually can on whatever matters come up. And so I would just, leave you with that. Engage, build on your strengths, grow this fantastic network, and celebrate your roots. We're in a really special place here in Appalachia, here in Southeast Ohio, and the spirit of the community here is strong. It's as we kind of come up on America's 250th birthday, which is just a few years away in 2026. So mark your calendars. There will be some, awesome celebrations. But I think that will really highlight Southeast Ohio and Appalachia in a way that we haven't done, recently. And with a lot of the things that are coming together with the investments, with new technologies, this is really the time for this region to shine. And you as leaders are going to be on the forefront of that. So So take some time, think about that, think about your individual goals and how you can really be part of what I see as the Renaissance here in the Appalachian region.